Welcome back to another episode of Local Search Tuesdays. This week, I'm sharing my SEO presentation from last week's National Auto Dealers Association convention. I just got back on Sunday from the National Auto Dealers Association convention in New Orleans. With the weather last week, it almost looked like they'd have to cancel the conference. I was originally scheduled to speak on Thursday, but with all the flight cancellations, no one could get there. The NADA team scrambled and moved all the Thursday sessions to Friday and Saturday. So I ended up speaking on Saturday afternoon. I know there were quite a few dealers who ended up having to cancel their trips because of the weather, so I wanted to share this recording so everyone who wanted to see it could have the opportunity to. Obviously, this episode is a bit longer since the session was 30 minutes long. I couldn't do the normal movie thing since the NADA lawyers won't let anything like that appear in presentations. So instead, I jumped over to ChatGPT and created some sweet Lego images. Check it out.
Hey, this is SEO Lessons Learned from over 1,500 dealership site audits. I do want to apologize that this is not the normal movie look and feel that you're used to, but unfortunately, NADA has some lawyers that are pretty strict and they don't like having movies in slides or TV in slides, so we had to go a little bit more generic so we can thank the images in today's presentation to ChatGPT. Got a little help creating some custom Lego images, so at least we have some cool visuals even though we don't have movies. And NADA also redid the title. I would not have said lessons learned from blah, blah, blah. But, it is what it is, so let's just go with what I presented. I've been talking about local SEO at pretty much every automotive conference for over a decade. And if I've been telling everyone exactly how to do SEO for 10 years or more, why is it that so many dealer sites are still so poorly optimized? I think one of the big problems is most dealers tend to use the OEM-approved digital marketing partners. But that OEM-approved system doesn't operate in a dealership's best interest. They have to take anyone that wants to sign up. They have to give a kickback to the person running the program. They're overloaded teams. It's just a lot of bad situations all in one kind of kit and caboodle. And almost every time, if you're using one of the in-program vendors, you're literally paying them to make your site worse. And Google's released tons and tons of updates to the algorithm, over 3,000 a year typically, but there have been several massive, really important updates over the last 3 years. But these automotive SEO vendors haven't updated their strategies to reflect the things that really need to change after these updates. It's really important to remember that you're not just shoving keywords in certain places anymore. You're optimizing your website for humans, doing the things that make your website better for people. That's the same thing as optimizing your website for Google. And you can't just follow a checklist and do the same thing for every dealership. You need a customized strategy if you want to win in today's market. I'm going to share some simple concepts with you today, but the most important thing you should remember is that if you boil Google down to the simplest concept, it's just a pattern detection program. It just looks at websites and determines patterns. So when you're doing SEO, you're trying to improve your pattern so you'll show up more often in searches. At Search Lab, we realize if we study this pattern, we get more insight into which elements influence visibility for the dealers that we work with. So we've done a lot of research. And today I'm going to share different information. Instead of sitting here and telling you how to do SEO, I'm going to tell you what not to do. Because if you know the most common mistakes, it helps you avoid doing bad SEO. So as of the end of September, when we had to turn these slides in, we have run our SEO scoring matrix on just over 1,500 dealerships. So the matrix is basically a little mini SEO audit that I created for when I speak at 20 groups. And this audit is all about local SEO. And it's because car dealers need local SEO. And how do we know that? Any search related to car dealerships, those searches are automatically localized. Like this search here. You can see from the blue dot where I'm located, I just searched Ford dealer. I didn't say Ford dealer near me. I didn't say Ford dealer nearby. I didn't say a city. And I still see in the map pack the 3 closest Ford dealerships to me. That's the clearest indication ever that Google says this search has local intent. But unlike other vendors out there, we don't do local SEO by doing regular stuff and just adding in a Google Business Profile. It's a different way of creating and optimizing content on your site. It's a different way of getting links pointed to your site. And reputation management is included as well because reviews are a massive signal. So it shouldn't be a separate vendor. It should be the same vendor that's handling your organic optimization. So those are the 4 areas that the matrix scores. And then the scores are weighted to approximate the importance of each of those areas to Google's local algorithm. So the on-site score evaluates how the content looks and how it's optimized. That's worth up to 44 points. The link score looks at inbound links pointed at the website, worth up to 10 points. The Google Business Profile score is worth up to 32 points. And obviously it looks at your primary GBP and how it's optimized. And then the review score is worth up to 14 points and looks at your reviews and responses on both Google and Yelp. I always like to point out that the matrix scores on basic tactics, not on strategy. And a lot of people use those terms interchangeably, but there's a really important difference. Strategy is the direction you're going, and tactics are the individual steps that you take to get there. Evaluating tactics makes it more helpful. If it was too much on the strategy side, and I did this at a 20 group, they'd come home and their current SEO partner would say, oh, they don't know anything about your strategy. You can just ignore it. But this makes it more helpful, keeping it at basic tactic level. Plus, without the right basic tactics in place, the strategy isn't going to matter anyway. So the scores are then added together and you get a score anywhere from 0 to 100 points. But it is possible to lose points. Most of the time, you just get points if you do something right and don't get points if it's not right. But for certain elements that are either likely or definitely hurting your visibility, you'll lose points. So the highest score we've ever seen is an 83.6 because effectively it's impossible to get 100 points. But that was one of our own clients. The highest non-client score we've ever seen is just a 65. And ideally, the range that you want to be in is mid-60s to low 80s. That's kind of the sweet spot. The lowest score we've ever seen was pretty shocking. I didn't even know it was possible to do this poorly. It was a negative 71.5. But if we look at the average of all the 1,500 dealers we've done this for in the last 2 years, the average is just 12.8 points out of a possible 100 points. And that score is trending down. 2 years ago, the average score was 22.5. Then a year ago, it was 14.5. And then last year, it was 12.8. So the state of SEO is actually getting worse in automotive instead of getting better. And we're also able to track the scores based on how dealerships handle SEO. Clearly, the ones that are using the vendor came out on top, but the guys that are handling it in-house did pretty well. And really clearly, the dealerships not doing SEO at all were the ones that got really bad scores. But if we look at the scores by section, we can see some interesting stuff too. The on-site scores average was just 0.2 points out of a possible 44. That's 0.5% if we're doing high school test grades. The average score for links is 0.4 out of 10. That's easy math. That's a 4% on your high school test. The average Google Business Profile is 7.6 points out of 32. That's a 23.8% on your high school test. The average review score is 4.6 out of 14, coming in as the highest average score with almost a 33% score. But this is typically a different vendor and not the SEO vendor. On-site is by far the most important for achieving better visibility in searches, but it is by far the lowest average score. So it's the thing that most dealers are really, really bad at. And just to throw it in there, we also tracked website providers. Dealer.com was on top. That's not really surprising, even though the site's garbage. Then Dealer Inspire is second. DealerOn is third. Then Ansira Synchro fourth with 6.2. Everyone else is lumped together in other providers because we needed at least 5% to really include all the various providers. So those are the 4 that had at least 5% out of the 1,500 that we studied. So these are the most common mistakes that we've seen while scoring these dealer websites. Mistake number 1, not updating default website content either from your website provider or your OEM. We see this service page on a ridiculous number of dealerships. And I like to point out fixed stops because it's where most dealers are really having the biggest deficit when it comes to SEO. But you got to update your content. Your content should be unique. It should really be about your dealership. Another big mistake we see is thin content, just a few sentences, or even worse, no content on the page whatsoever. And that happens a lot on the homepage. We see a lot of pages that do not have an embedded image on the page. So if you don't have text and you don't have an image, you don't have quality content. And then how is Google going to decide that you deserve to show in search results? Even worse, how are customers going to decide they want to buy from you if you don't have good content on your site? And you can't make Google work a certain way. You really need to understand how Google evaluates content so that you can work within the guidelines. Because I can't tell you how often dealers are like, well, it should just work like this. Okay, great. Just because you want it to work that way doesn't mean it actually works that way. So again, another simple concept you really need to remember beyond the pattern detection is that if you want to show as a search result when somebody types in a particular keyword phrase, then you need a dedicated page about that singular concept on your site. And that page needs to be the best answer in the local area to the question that the searcher is asking. And if you're writing the best answer, that means you should probably answer some of the subsequent questions the searcher would ask once they got that initial answer. It's really important to consider that when you're writing all of your content. And you've got to be sure that you're writing for actual humans and then optimizing for Google. If you're writing just for Google and ignoring humans, you're doing it really wrong and you're going to screw up your site and you're going to lose visibility. And when you optimize for Google's pattern detection, once you've written your amazing content, make sure that you're optimizing for a single concept and a single location per page. That's one keyword phrase, one location phrase. You can't mix that up. It's a bad pattern. Another big mistake we see is not creating separate pages for different topics or concepts. Again, on that same default service department page, we always just see a big bullet point list. And a lot of this is single words: batteries, headlights, starters, struts. Why is Google going to show you as a search result when you have one word in a bullet point list? You need a page per concept. We also see dealers and vendors optimizing with multiple cities in the title tag and the H1 heading. You're not going to show up in a bunch of cities just because you put it in your title tag, your H1 heading. And even worse, we see mismatched keywords or mismatched cities. So the title tag will have one keyword in one city and the H1 will have a different keyword in a different city. Again, it's always back to the pattern detection side of things. That's a bad pattern. Another massive mistake we see is people adding content for concepts that they already rank really well for. If you're the only Ford dealer in town, you don't need to add more Ford dealer or Ford model content. You also shouldn't really add content around things that you'll never rank for, because that crappy 300-word blog post about the new model or new features or the towing capacity or the color options is never going to rank. And people aren't going to search for the color options for a particular vehicle in one city anyway, because it's universal everywhere. Another massive mistake is only optimizing the site for cities that are 45 minutes, an hour, hour and a half away from the dealership. You got to own your backyard. You got to optimize for the town that you're in before you try to optimize for nearby cities. We also see dealers trying to optimize for nearby cities by adding lots of useless city pages, like this Mercedes dealer that has a list of like 30 nearby cities. But those city pages aren't valuable because they're just a page of directions. But how is that going to help? This is like SEO from 20 years ago. People have cell phones now with Apple Maps or Google Maps on it. People have Waze. People have it in their car. They're not going to go to your website to try to find their city to then click the button to get directions to your dealership from that city. They're just going to use their phone. So how is this valuable to customers? And you're not going to rank in another city just because you added a page of crappy content about that city. We also see tons of dealers trying to optimize for near me. Are you looking for an oil change near me? Are you looking for a Ford dealer near me? Which doesn't even read correctly, because if it says near me on the site, then that means as I read it as a customer, it should say it means I'm looking for something near the dealership. It would say near you if you're talking to the person that's doing it. But people are shoving in near me to try to show up as a result when people search for a topic near me. But people don't search for a topic near me expecting to just see things that match keywords. They're explicitly telling Google they want search results that are physically near their actual real world location. Adding near me to your content isn't going to help you show up for that. You're either close to that person or you're not close to that person. If you're on a dealer.com or a dealer on site, watch out for hidden H1 headings. Dealer.com likes to put them on the logo in the header, and Dealer On will just put hidden headings in the code for all the interior pages of the site and then have a second H1 that's actually visible on the page. That's a really bad pattern. Another big mistake, homepage slideshows with tons of images. I did a 20 group in Austin a few weeks ago, and one of the dealers in the room had 43 images in the homepage slideshow. No one is going to see those. You are drastically slowing down the load speed of your site just to cram in a bunch of images that don't improve the user experience on your site. Why would you do that? Really, you shouldn't even have a slideshow at all. One kick-ass image is always going to outperform a slideshow. Customers don't watch them. Customers don't click on them. Ditch the slideshows. We see a ton of dealerships that don't have a blog. That's a problem because you need a blog to target all of the search journey. Most dealers only add content that focuses on the extreme bottom of the funnel, but that's a very narrow focus on the local market. So you need to be able to do those informational posts or those discovery posts, and those make much more sense on your blog. And that allows you to target those shoppers that aren't quite far enough down the funnel to be ready to convert. We also see dealers cramming in city names where they don't even work just to try to target search results in other cities, like this guy. The 2024 Ford Ranger Lariat is no different near Hoover, Alabama than it is anywhere else in the world. Or the Bronco Badlands model is no different near Enterprise than it is anywhere else in the world. So this is a great example of a bunch of concepts that you shouldn't be writing about because you're not really going to show up in search results anyway, and B, all of these are cities around the dealership. They're not optimizing for the city the dealership's in. They're not even consistently optimizing around a nearby city. They're just every time, let's just pick a different random city name from the nearby area, and none of these make sense. Customers don't search near a city anyway. They search in a city. We also evaluated links, and the average number of websites sending links to dealership sites was only 255 sites. Now, don't come at me. I know you probably have a lot more links than that, but it's really important when you're evaluating your links that you look at the number of unique websites, not the total number of links, because there is exponential diminishing return in getting more links from the same website once you've already gotten a link from that website. Another big mistake around links is we see dealers only getting links from these random sites that are for SEO, but they're not sites that any human would go to, and they're not really going to matter. Google's local algorithm wants to see links coming from other websites in the same local area. The average number of reviews that dealers accumulated was 1,203. Doesn't mean you need that many. You just need more than your local competitors, but the average that we saw in this study was 1,200. The average rating was just a 4.3. Now, a lot of studies have been done over the years that show the ideal score range is anywhere from a 4.4 to 4.7. So this is a little low for the kind of sweet spot that we want to see dealers be in. Another big mistake, no responses to bad reviews. And then of the dealers that did respond to the bad reviews, pretty much everybody did it correctly. Like this guy that posts the exact same response to every single review and just changes out the name of the person he responds to. If every bad review is responded to with, "Hey, I'm Greg, I'm the service manager. We try to give great service to everybody. We're sorry we didn't do it this time. Call me at 8675309 and tell me more about what happened," you actually look like you don't care, because everybody knows that if that person came in to buy a car or get service, that you have that person's information. So if you got a bad review, shouldn't you be reaching out offline in the real world and not just throwing the ball back in the reviewer's court and having them tell you more about the situation that they literally probably just told you about in the review? It makes you look like you don't care about those upset customers. And you know, when you first go to your business profile and you go to the reviews and there's a default sort order before you click, I want the newest reviews or the best reviews or the worst reviews. If a bad review shows up there, it can be incredibly damaging. So there's some new research that's really compelling that I want to talk about. Cool little trick you can do. If a review has a photo uploaded along with it, it's stickier and it stays in that default sort order for a longer period of time. If a review has more text, if it's longer, it's stickier and it stays in the default sort order for a longer period of time. And if the review has 2 or more thumbs up, it stays in the default sort order for a longer period of time. So if you get a bad review that's showing in the default sort, just reach out to some customers that have recently left awesome 5-star reviews. Ask them to expand, tell a little bit more of a story, give a little bit more detail, and upload a photo along with it, and let you know when that's done. And once they've done it, have a couple people at the dealership give it a thumbs up, and boom, that thing jumps to the top of the list, and you can do that 3 or 4 times to bury the bad review really quickly. Make sure you understand the implications of the updated FTC rules around reviews. The update happened last fall, and it is now illegal at a federal level to post fake reviews. And Google is now displaying an alert. If fake reviews are detected and removed, you'll see this alert. But more importantly, it's about the federal law. They just made an example of a dealership group in Illinois that was fined $10 million for faking reviews and doing other deceptive practices. So you don't want to get that $1 million fine. Another big mistake, ignoring Yelp. It's really important to pay attention to your Yelp rating, because if someone looks up directions on Apple Maps, the stars that are displayed are Yelp stars, not Google stars. And you don't want to lose business because a customer sees that suddenly you don't have a good review score. Another big mistake, selecting the wrong primary category in your Google business profile. The primary category is the most weighted category. You want to be strategic and make sure you're choosing the correct thing. Another big mistake around categories is we see dealers selecting incorrect categories that aren't related at all to car dealerships. And you shouldn't have these things in there. It confuses Google, and it takes the ability away for you to fill that category slot with something that would bring you additional visibility. Like, don't put electric vehicle charging station. That's boneheaded. Car service is like someone that picks you up and drives you. That's like Uber. It doesn't mean you're servicing the car. And you're not a chauffeur. You're not a manufacturer. You don't make anything. You're not a car factory. You don't make the vehicles. You just sell them. So remember, it's pattern detection. Another big mistake with Google Business Profiles is not setting up a separate department Google Business Profile for service and a separate one for parts. Google literally changed the rules just for car dealers to allow car dealers to do this. So if Google is going to change the rules for one particular vertical, that means they have a lot of data that says that that is beneficial for both customers and the business to do so. So why would you not do something that Google lets you do if other businesses aren't allowed to do it? You are allowed to have a separate Google Business Profile for your service department, your parts department, and collision or body shop. You are not allowed to set up a separate Google Business Profile for your finance department, your used car department, or for vehicle acquisition. And when you set these departments up, each one should only have categories related to that individual department. So your primary categories should only be sales related categories. Your your service should only be service, and your parts should only be parts. Don't mix them up between. Make sure you've got UTM tracking on your website links, because Google Analytics is broken and it will attribute that traffic to direct if you don't have the right kind of UTM tracking. So make sure you've got it, and not just your website link, but on any link in your Google Business Profile, you should make sure you have it. And when you're setting it up, don't use Google as the source. A lot of people will tell you to do that, but then you have to start dropping down secondary dimensions to tell the difference between normal organic clicks and clicks on the map pack or your business profile. So it's just easier to use a different source other than Google, and make sure your medium is set to organic with a lowercase o. If you're a Ford dealer, check this, because there's some vendor that works with Ford dealers that is setting these up as social for the medium, which is incredibly incorrect. We also see a lot of dealers not uploading their own questions into the Q&A section on their Google Business Profile. And we also see them not answering any questions on the Google Business Profile. Or if they're answering, they're not ensuring that their answer is displayed as the primary answer to all the questions, because it's a community discussion widget. So whichever answer has the most upvotes is displayed as the primary answer. And it's really important that the dealership has the primary answer to every question. This isn't important because it's going to help with ranking. It doesn't affect ranking. But it's really great from a conversion standpoint, because it's really neat how Google built this widget. You know how when you go to Google and you start typing something in and it will auto-complete your search phrase? Kind of works the same way. If someone's typing in a question and a similar question has been asked and answered in the past, Google will auto-complete the question that you're typing in, and it will automatically display an answer. So that potential customer is getting an answer faster than what they would get talking to a human or an AI chatbot. It's an amazing pre-site experience that will get you more conversions. Another big mistake, we see a lot of dealers treating Google posts like they're social media, and they're absolutely not social media. We see them sharing delivery photos, doesn't matter, doesn't work. We see them even sharing the generic brand feed, which you shouldn't even be doing on social media. We see posts that have a really bad image thumbnail. You've got to remember that posts are free ads that are displayed on your Google Business Profile. You need to make sure that they're compelling. You don't really have to understand all the ins and outs about how SEO works. Just remember that Google is basically a pattern detection program. You want to look at the overall pattern. So use your common sense and the information I shared today to avoid bad SEO, and you can win in the future. If you'd like to get your site scored, scan this QR, give us your details, and we will scan your site for free. If you've got any questions, you can pop me an email at greg@searchlabdigital.com. And that is the end for today's presentation.
Thanks for sticking around to watch the whole thing. That's definitely all the time we have left for this week's episode, so you know what that means. Put your hand on the screen right here. We totally just high-fived because you learned something awesome. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again next week for another episode of Local Search Tuesdays. And you definitely don't want to miss next week. We'll be sharing our crowd favorite NADA mean tweets.